the modern state has reached a point of crisis. And we believe that the Sharia specifically and Islam generally has the solutions to these crises and the solutions to these to the predicaments that the modern world finds itself in. And halak says that they are not simply political crises, they're not simply economic crises, that these are fundamentally moral crises,
exactly.
right? And that they are secondarily political or economic. And it's exactly the distinction and the separation of law and the state from morality that's the hallmark of the modern state that has got us in this mess in the first place.
If people don't quite grasp that, just ask a simple question. If we're citizens of the UK, like I am, or you, the United States, or France, or Germany, any Western country, and you ask of your governments, your rulers, what is it to be a good person? How should I morally live? Does God exist? If he does, how am I to follow him? And I can go to this really hot button moral issues, and the government will not give you an answer. It won't tell you how to live your life. It is a moral free zone. And indeed, many would say that's the point. They don't want to be morally charged, except now with this emergent kind of quasi-religion of wokeism, which is slightly different. But it doesn't really get to the metaphysics or the philosophy of life. It's just arguing about certain alternative lifestyles, which are arguably extremely minor and marginal issues, although they for some reason have taken center stage in Western discourse and political posturing, particularly towards Qatar, as we've already said. Goodness knows why, because this particular issue, without going into it, is very marginal, affects very few people numerically, and yet it's so central, apparently.
Well, it's because of what it represents, right? It's not about
I don't want to go exactly. So, but the point is, the governments won't give it. If I was to go to 10 Downing Street or go up to Pennsylvania Avenue and say, Mr. Ruler, how should I live my life to be a good person? He'll say, go and talk to you, go away. He won't tell you. Or he'll probably say, vote for me or something. But it's not there. It's not meant to be part of the DNA of a modern state. But Islam, of course, the Islamic understanding of society, is much more holistic and moral. There's a moral evaluation of the human being as a person who is created by God with certain obligations and duties to the poor and the weak, and so on. It's a very rich, complex moral universe in the public sphere, which has been removed, I think, from, look at France, for example, the laïcité is being deliberately eviscerated, that's the word, from the public domain.
Yes, and that's not to say that the state does not have metaphysical assumptions or does not, at the end of the day, have certain moral assumptions. It does. However, it doesn't self-understand as taking stances on moral issues or participating in the moral sort of formation of its subjects. And so the morality that is kind of asserted by those sorts of forces is very thin. It's very, very thin compared to, it's like they say, like, you can't not do philosophy. Either you're doing it well or you're doing it poorly, right? So it's a similar thing when it comes to moral formation. You can imagine that you're not doing moral formation, but in reality, either you realize that you're doing it and so you're paying attention to it and doing it sort of well, or you don't realize the ways in which you're doing it and you're doing it very poorly.
So it's a secularism, or secular liberalism would be one way of describing the ideology or the philosophical underpinnings of Western civilization, which is forming its citizens to look at the world in a certain very secular, narrowly liberal, defined way.
And so the moral predicament of the modern state, halak identifies three major sort of nodes or points of crisis. One is the collapse of organic social units, the family and religion. Number two is the rise of oppressive economic forms. In a different and specific way from what we've seen in the pre-modern era. And then three, and this is the most essential one for halak, and I think good on him for stressing this throughout his works, is the not just destruction, but the extinction of the environment, right? All of these three sort of things and crises were not possible without the unhinging or decoupling of morality from the state or from the political technology, the system of governance, whatever you want to call it.